My name is Bud Dennis. I'm a lifelong resident of Washington County, of course. Having been born in the south part of the county and went to early school, of course, at South Washington County, a little community of Black Oak, where I went the first 3 years. Then we transferred to Brentwood, where we had a two-room school. We really moved up. And we finished grade school there, and then that's when the consolidation started over about 49, and then we consolidated with Greenland, and of course I went 4 years and graduated from Greenland High School. My dad was actually from the little community of Hazel Valley. He was one of about 12, which is there's two of them left now, but he was one of them hard workers that worked at home, raised crops and run a few cattle and done a little of this, anything to make a dime back then. That's what he did. My mother, Hutchins Creek, is named after her family, and that's the community where I actually live. And they was settlers from a long time back, and of course she did work out. She done her work at home and raised the family, and that.
Tell me about what it was like growing up. You mentioned earlier about electricity and water. Tell me about what it was like
Well,
growing
of
up.
course, the first 10 or 12 years of my life, there's no running water, no electricity. We used the kerosene lamps and the wood stove and all that. And then when I was probably 8 to 10 years old, Ozark Electric started stringing lines and poles down there, and of course I was too young to be working, but I spent the time with them. They'd even let me climb a pole every once in a while because I knew I'd slide and get splinters all in my legs, and that they had a lot of fun out of me doing that.
Tell me about how you got into law enforcement. Talk about that.
Well, I was working for the Forestry Service at the time for the commissioner up here was Everett Hill, a fine gentleman, and he was a real close friend of Hollis Spencer. Hollis Spencer was the chief of police at Fayetteville, of course, at that time, and he would come out to the Forestry Commission out to the university from time to time, and I just got to talking to him and decided I thought that's probably what I wanted to do, and in fact we had the law then that I guess nepotism, I'm sure, but anyway, I had an uncle that worked at the Fayetteville Police Department, and I couldn't go to work at that time, but he took a leave and went to work for Dennis Home Furnishings, which was a brother of his, and then that left it where I could go to work at the city and did. And one thing I'll never forget, I was under Civil Service Commission, and one of the commissioners was a fine attorney, Bill Murphy, and he was on. Floyd Carl was on the commission. Anyway, I went up to take my civil service test, and I was already working. And I know this is probably not good to say, but Bill Murphy, the first question he asked me was, "Aren't you already working?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he said, "Get up and go back to work." That was the only question that civil service asked me. So I passed the test, but he said, "Just get up and go back to work." Then that was my civil service test.
Tell me about the Fayetteville Police Department at that time. Tell me about the chief and some of the people you remember that worked there.
The chief at the time was, as I said before, was Hollis Spencer. As far as I'm concerned, back at that time, he was Mr. Law Enforcement in the state. Elmo Ritchie was the assistant chief. He had from Madison County, and that's where he was born and raised over there. We had a small department. There was about probably 8 of us on patrol when I first started, and then of course we had 2 or 3 dispatchers, and we just had a small, maybe 20 at the most for the whole city, but we had some good dedicated officers, and we handled the job, and there was no gripes about it.
What was the jail like, the city jail like at that time?
Well, actually, we had a one large compartment where, of course, most of them stayed. But as far as individual cells, we probably had 8 individual cells, that's 1 or 2 prisoners. But the barracks were at that time we didn't. Now I know Sheriff Helder and all of them has to keep them all separated. Back then we didn't pay a lot of attention to that, of course. As far as females, males, they of course had to, but classifications as they do now, they can't put this one in the cell with that one and this and that. Back then, that wasn't a concern. We just put them in there, and that was it. So it made it a lot easier that way because we didn't have to have near the space that they do this day.
Tell me about your decision to run for sheriff, and then how you eventually became sheriff. I think you ran twice.
I once I got into law enforcement, not necessarily the way it was, but they always considered that the sheriff was the ramrod of the whole county, whether it be city or county. And I just, and since I always lived out in the county, I just thought I'd try to become sheriff, and so I could work more with my kind of people, which is the country people. And I talked to Hollis about it, talked to Glenn Reagans, another former chief at Fayetteville, and they went along with me and thought that was the thing to do, and I just put my best foot forward and went after it, and I got fortunate enough to become sheriff and stayed as long as I wanted to. I stayed till I got my time in, and that's what I was hunting for.
Talk to me about what the sheriff's office was like when you took over, and then any changes maybe that you made once you were there.
Well, when I first went into the sheriff's office, we didn't have very many people. Probably the whole department wouldn't have been over 25 for the whole county, and that's taking care of the jail, that's taking care of the courts, that's doing it all, serving your civil papers, everything there was to do. And then all of a sudden, the county's got to growing so big, which we just had to build another jail, which we built on North College, and moved into that. And in 4, 5, 8 years, it was too small, and that's the reason we've got this. And it's got a great one right now, but it's still not big enough. And it's going to get worse the way the population's going. But the little jail that when I first was down in the basement, the old army building up there, a dungeon, but we survived with it, and that was all until we could get one built that would satisfy us better.
What was the sheriff's posse, and how did you use the posse?
Well, they was just a group of dedicated men from all over the county, including some Springdale City. That didn't make any difference. Before I went in, there was actually a mounted police department where they all had horses and they all had matching saddles and everything. But that was sort of diminishing by the time I got there, so we'd done away with that part, except maybe the parades and stuff. We still done that, but they were certified police officers, and I did go to bat for them and got them some training where could qualify for do more. But that group of men, and there was probably about 20 of them, I could call them any time of day or night, and there they'd be. If we had a manhunt or going, whatever we had, I used them every week. I used some of them for something. A couple of bankers here, Buddy Ledford was on one of them, and he was terrific. I could just keep a name on the gentlemen that give for nothing, give their time to help law enforcement in Washington County, and they was to me they was as important as the regulars really, and they never once did they have one of them say I can't, or something. They'd miss work or whatever they was doing to help Washington County. That's just the dedicated people that they were.
Talk to me about when you were sheriff. Who was your chief deputy and some of your key officers that helped you?
Well, I had two chief deputies. I had Clint Hutchins, who retired from Fayetteville Police Department. I worked with for years. The other one was Bill Brooks, and likewise, he'd worked at the Fayetteville Police Department, retired. And I'd worked with them for 15 years, and I knew what kind of individuals they do, and I knew they would not make anything. They would not stir any waters. They'd do their job, and that was it. But they were the two main cogs that I had going for me. Both of them, of course, is deceased now, but they was law enforcement officers.
Talk to me about as many sheriffs as you can remember going back, past and present sheriffs.
Well, probably the first one that I really felt like was a real sheriff in my time, and I was just a kid in, was Bruce Crowder. He was sheriff for many years. Arthur Davidson was another member that, and then that gets up to where you get the Bill Longs and Herb Marshall and things like that. But before Hollis Spencer's time, I was just young then. I don't remember exactly who all or when, but I know they had to have some good ones. But my part started with Hollis Spencer, is who started with, and then it went from there up to the present day to Tim Helder, and I know every one of them. I know them well.
What was Hollis like as a sheriff?
He was all business, and the good thing about Hollis Spencer was that he could talk on anybody's level. He could talk to a professor at the university like I could talk to a logger out here or something. He made the show every day. He might not have stayed long on Sunday morning, but he always showed up 7 days a week to see if what all was going on, and then he was, and of course I was captain, and I done most of the paperwork back then, and he would come in and go through my paperwork, and like I say, he was there, and everybody, of course he was so big in law enforcement that of course he had meetings at Little Rock quite often, but he was I still consider him Mr. Law Enforcement.
You made a decision at some point to no longer be sheriff and to start your bonding business. Tell me about that.
Well, that was good and bad. At that time, a bondman was making pretty good salaries. It didn't hold that true for me, it seemed like, but anyway, I had my time in, and I thought, well, I'll just get my license and go in the bonding business, and which I did for a few years, and then I got a chance to get out of it and go to the farm and stay there, and that's. But yes, I that was the decision. That was probably one of the worst decisions I ever made as far as because you have so many people skip, and I'd be in California chasing somebody one week and New York the next week, and it just runs you to death trying to get them fellows because we just bonded a lot of people probably that we shouldn't have that left the country. I've still got $35,000 tied up in one in Switzerland, and we don't have a trade pact with them, so that's come out of my pocket. That still stings a little bit, but that's part of the job.
When you were sheriff, who were the different prosecutors you worked with, and what were they like?
Well, you started with a Malin Gibson, who later became one of the finest judges in the state of Arkansas. Had a Kim Smith. Of course, I can remember back at Ted Cox seeing some of them way back. Not that I was ever worked with them or anything, but I do remember them. And then I've known all the prosecutors and judges since then that go, like I say, through Malin Gibson, Judge Bill Story, Kim Smith. You just name them, and we've had a super group of judges ever since I've been in law enforcement.
What about the public defenders? Did you ever know those guys?
I knew them well and always worked good with them, and they was always plenty helpful, and of course the public had to have them, and we got to have them now, and I know they're definitely overworked, but of course I didn't work with them as close as I did with the prosecutors and the judges, but I still knew them all and had a great respect for every one of them.
Back when you were sheriff, what was the juvenile justice system like? Who was in charge of it, and what was it like?
That's one of the headaches that's always going to be, and we had to then. You just had to just sort of play it by ear and hope that this judge would see some way to get some help or something like that. That's a never-ending battle, and it's not really a good answer or there wasn't back then. Now there is, but back then the sheriff had that responsibility, and really I for one wasn't really up to handling it. So I just I had people that worked with the juveniles, but not like it should have been. I'll be the first to admit that.
If somebody asked you what were some of your best accomplishments, or maybe some of the things you are most proud of that you did as sheriff, what were some of the things you could say?
Well, I think the best during all my time there was the amount of major manhunts that we had that all turned out the right way. That gets back to the sheriff's posse and everybody else. If we had a manhunt for 4 or 5 days, they would be there, and we didn't lose any that way, and that's an accomplishment that I'll never forget. Is the hard work and luck together, the combination of two, that paid off on all your major manhunts, which is like the one that killed the chief at West Fork, that killed the 2 pharmacists here in town. Well, those manhunts lasted for about 4 or 5 days, but we managed to get them all incarcerated, and like what we set out to do.
Were you sheriff whenever the West Fork incident happened?
Yes, I was.
Tell me about that one, and what was that like? How did that impact law enforcement?
That happened at the little town of West Fork, south of here. I'd been the sheriff about less than a year as best I remember. And I lived in West Fork at the time, and of course, I was just about, the way the crow flies, I was about a mile from where it happened, around the road at 3 miles. So I was there immediately, and of course the chief was laying there beside the highway. Obviously, he was no longer with us, but he, the chief did wound one of the two fellows, and of course we got him. The other one that actually done the shooting took off on foot, and and then 4 days later we finally got him about 5 miles from where it started from, and that was a sad thing for the city of West Fork at that time, but we just put in some 24-hour days and finally got him in a rural farmhouse.
Tell me about the sheriffs who came after you and what kind of the jobs they did.
The one that was behind me was Kenneth McKee. He, like myself, and like Bruce Crider, was all in for 5 terms each, and of course Sheriff Hellers beat that by quite a bit already. But then after that we had Steve Whitmill for a short while, and Steve was a very good sheriff. He got a chance to go to work with a big organization, and took that. Then Lee Owens filled in for the rest of his term, and then that's when Tim Helder was elected after that. And of course that's been 14 years or so, and he's still here, thank goodness.
If someone asked you what kind of a job Tim Helder has done as sheriff, what would you say?
I'd say I'd have to give him an A+. I really would. I trust that man with all. Matter of fact, I was the first one to put him to work, and way back then.
Tell me about that. When you hired Tim, what was he doing and what was he like?
Well, actually, he had just finished school, really. My oldest daughter and he were in the same grade in the school, and he wanted to know if what I thought about law enforcement. And of course, as it come to find out, his father's been in law enforcement in California before that, and I put him to work, and then not long after that, he got a chance to go to Fayetteville, and of course Fayetteville was civil service, and I said, take it, because here as a sheriff, at the sheriff's office, if I'm not a re-elected sheriff, the next one would come in and say, bye, Tim. So I said I'd take that if I could get it, because of the civil service, and he did, and he's always been very thankful that he did go in to the Fayetteville Police Department, retired from there, and then he run for sheriff, and as we all know, he's been elected and re-elected and re-elected. And the same with Cantrell and Denzer, who's the 2 chief deputies here now. I also put them to work the same way. So I feel fortunate that I've started a bunch of good officers in law enforcement, and I will take credit for that, because I was the first one to put them to work.
You mentioned Cantrell and Denzer. Tell me about those guys. What are they like, and when did they start working?
They started right after I was elected sheriff back in '80. They was 2 of the first so-called rookies that I put to work, and they've just been sensational. I guarantee there's no sheriff going to run them off. They got to have them, and they've been through McKee. They've been through everybody all the way up, and of course they're still here, and they're still the main cogs as far as I'm concerned. There's no replacing Tim Helder, but boy, he's got two fellows out there that started to work for me way back then. That they'll ring the bell.
What else can you think of about the sheriff's office or serving the public, maybe that I haven't asked about that you could tell me?
Well, you've covered as far as I'm concerned, you've covered the main part of everything there is. It's just got the. We're here. Well, I think we're very fortunate here in Washington County that we've got the kind of setup that we have got. A lot of there's 74 other counties that I would like to say we've got as good a setup as Washington County. They can't say that, you know. There's a lot of good organizations around, but as far as I'm concerned, the number one organization is Washington County. And I sincerely believe that this is what well, of course, Tim Helder's the main plug for that, because he's not only is he a law enforcement, he's a politician too, and I'll go along with him.
If someone came to you, Bud, who wasn't from Washington County, maybe from another part of the country, and said, you grew up in Washington County, what's Washington County like? What would you tell them?
Well, I'd tell them that there isn't a better place to live. It showed me 82 good years, except the time I was in the Army. The rest of the time it's been here. I didn't go anywhere else looking for something better, because I figured this is about the best you can get. So why go somewhere else? So that's the reason I live and breathe Washington County.
Good. One last question. How would you finish this sentence? My favorite thing about Washington County is.
That could be numerous things, but the favorite thing I've always had about the people in Washington County is that most of them try to do everything they can to make us better, not only in the cities but in the county too. We've got so many people that give so much time to try to make it. Hey, I'm talking about little communities out here, little old Winslow. They work all the time trying to make it look better and be just a little bit better. And that's just one of the very small communities. And it's that way all over Washington County. They're wanting it to be just a little better. And it don't get no better. It's good as it can be as far as I'm concerned.